one of the biggest supports you give to the families?
The biggest support that we give to the family is the time to talk to them. Communicating with people directly is very important. But lots of times people will come, and if the clinics are really busy, they don't have time to talk to them and spend the time with some people. And some people forget to ask questions, or they think of questions afterwards. They'll come and see me, and I can write down those questions for them and go and talk with the doctor about it. And that way, it makes sure that there's lots of talking and people understand, because when you're going through cancer treatment, understanding what type of treatment you're going to have or what kind of treatment is very important. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
What makes you different than all the other cancer foundations?
Our foundation here is because all the money stays in Manitoba. So we do lots of research. There's lots of research on site here, upstairs, and I don't know if Sherelle's going to take you up to the labs, but we do lots of on-site research, and that's different than a lot of cancer agencies across Canada. So we actually have on-site research. And as well, it makes us different. We don't have inpatient beds, so people don't come here and stay overnight if they're sick.
Okay.
That's a bit different. We have people, they come in, they walk in for their appointment, and they walk out, much like when you go to a walk-in clinic. You don't stay overnight in a walk-in clinic. But people here come in, get their treatment, and then they go home. So that makes us a little different, because some of the cancer places across Canada have overnight stay, so people are kept overnight. So that's kind of the two big differences between us and other cancer agencies across Canada. And in Manitoba, we are the only cancer agency, which makes us different, for example, compared to Ontario. They have different cancer centers in different cities in Ontario. We have a cancer center here, and then we have another site in Brandon. That's it. So anybody that needs cancer treatment that could be way far north, you've heard of Churchill, where they can't get the rail line in anymore. If people need care as far north as Churchill, and we actually provide care to some of the people that are up in Northwest Territories as well, then they have to come all the way to Winnipeg. So it can be hard for some people to travel and get care coming from that distance. So that's how we're a little bit different.
Okay. Do you have any volunteers to help you out?
In cancer care, we do. We have actually a volunteer department. Interestingly enough, my mom and dad volunteer in that volunteer department, and they'll be here in about an hour. But the volunteers, they provide coffee and tea and juice and cookies to patients that are waiting for appointments. They actually run samples. So if we have blood samples or other things that need to go to the health sciences labs, they'll run them to the health sciences lab. We have volunteers that sit in our patient resource center, so that's where all the books are. People that are patients or families can go and research the cancer that they may have or their family member may have, and they can actually check out the books. So we have volunteers that sit in there and help us. If you go to the front door, you'll see, and they're all in blue vests, you'll see a volunteer at the front door that provides directions to some of our patients. If they're coming for the first time, you can imagine they'd be kind of scared if they don't know what to expect. So they'll check in with the volunteers at the front door, and they'll be able to direct them where to go and give them some idea of what to expect. So volunteers play a big role here. We value our volunteers quite a bit. And lots of times and when you're 14, you can come and volunteer as well. And also we have a volunteer corner at the front here, and I don't know if we have enough volunteers today to open it up, but they sell things that people donate to raise money for the foundation. So some people do a lot of knitting. So we have big afghans, and they have scarves, we have toques, we have little animals that they crochet. We have one gentleman who's a patient who has made a bunch of really beautiful wooden cutting boards. Just gorgeous things. So those raise money for the foundation too. And that's run by our volunteers.
Okay. And my last question is, what is one of your favorite fundraisers?
One of my favorite fundraisers, and I'll just speak from my perspective, I could tell you about the fundraiser that I have on my board here. For this lady here, in the picture, is Jackie Szymanski. And Jackie was actually one of our staff members in communications, and she passed away of breast cancer in May of last year. And Jackie actually had a very interesting history in that she was a Winnipegger who went over to Bosnia during the war in the 90s. She was going to Red River and trying to study communications, and she thought, I'm going to be part of that. I want to go over to Bosnia and be part of the action and get my feet wet. So she dropped all of her schooling, went over to Bosnia, worked very hard, and got picked up by CNN as their Bosnian correspondent during the war. So she worked for CNN for a number of years, came back to Winnipeg. I think it took her about a year to decompress from all the things that she had seen over there that were horrific. Worked at the gardens at Assiniboine Park for a year, and then worked back in communications, and she eventually came to us, and sadly we worked with her for probably 5 years before she passed away. But we have a dinner now that the staff and friends put on every year, and we've done 2 now that raise money for the foundation for breast cancer research specifically. But that takes a lot of time for the ones that are involved in it to make it a good go. But that's probably my favorite fundraiser because I'm directly involved in it. But the foundation puts on many, many fundraisers, and it's important to know that they fundraise for all sorts of different kinds of cancers. Because, you know what, unfortunately, any body part you can think of, there's unfortunately a cancer that can be part of that.
What is Cancer Care Manitoba Foundation?
So the foundation is, we exist to raise funds for Cancer Care Manitoba. So every dollar that we raise will stay right here in Manitoba, and it'll help with things like research and patient and family services, clinical trials. So we exist because sometimes things like treatment the government will pay for, but there's some things that they can't pay for. And so we exist to help bridge that gap. So every dollar that people raise when they do fundraising will help the researchers and the doctors here find better treatment and hopefully cures for cancer.
How do you get your funding?
We get most of our funding from donors. And so people like yourself who do fundraising things where they can either do community events. We do 4 big events a year. We have 2 galas and 2 big events called Challenge for Life and Dragon Boat. So we fundraise through that. We fundraise, some people become a monthly donor. So every month they make a donation to the foundation. So there's all sorts of ways, but really it's other people saying that they want to support the work here. And we take those funds and steward them to the needs of cancer care.
Okay. How do you decide where the money goes?
It's a great question. So we actually don't decide. It's Cancer Care and really the doctors there that decide where the money we raise goes. So every year they will set out and say these are the big top projects or things that we need money for that we need to fundraise for. So things that wouldn't be eligible for what we call government funding. So it might be research and clinical trials and those things I mentioned. They will highlight the top needs of cancer care and say this is how much we essentially need. Then we go out and fundraise. So it's the cancer care doctors and their professionals that decide.
Okay. What happens if you don't have enough money to get the stuff that you need?
Well, we keep fundraising. We just keep fundraising every year. Until cancer doesn't exist, I think we'll always keep at it because we want a world free of cancer. And so most years we're able to meet the needs that we've committed to, and we'll always continue fundraising until those needs are met.
Okay. How many families do you think you support in a year?
Well, I know in a year there's between 6,000 and 7,000 people diagnosed with cancer. So that's just here in Manitoba. And so those are just individual patients who would all have family members, right, that now know a loved one. But those are new patients every year. And so oftentimes when you receive a cancer diagnosis, you might need treatment for many years. And so really the amount of people that are treated in Manitoba it can be thousands and thousands and thousands depending on how long they need to have treatment.
Okay. What kind of support do you give to the families?
So Heather was a great example of patient and family support services where they can meet with nurses. You might have lots of questions. You don't really know what to do. There's all sort of support groups that people can go to depending on maybe what type of cancer they have. There's a place specifically just for women called the Breast and Gynae Cancer Center of Hope where they can go, and there's a dedicated staff that will talk to them and counsel them and have lots of resources for them. There's also a program that's called a psychosocial. So a lot of people, it's not just physically what happens to you, but it's mentally and emotionally. So there's all sorts of supports for family members as well as patients that they can access.
Okay. What are some of the biggest fundraisers?
Some of the biggest fundraisers? Well, we have a really big one right now. It's going to be this weekend. On February 4th is World Cancer Day. And so the theme is We Can, I Can, and one of our community organizers wants to break a Guinness World Record for the longest chain of ice skaters at the Forks. So that's a really big fundraiser that's happening right now. The Winnipeg Jets do Hockey Fights Cancer. We have one that's called Techapalooza, and it's a whole bunch of people who work with computers in the IT world, and they put in bands of themselves, and they have a band-to-band combat. And they raise a lot of money, and it's everything from folks who they might just have a garage sale and donate their proceeds. Some young and old will donate their birthdays and say, I don't want gifts, I'd rather just donate, gifts. Instead of to me, give it to Cancer Care. So really there's all sorts from big and small, and they all make a difference.
Okay. Why did you want to work with Cancer Care Manitoba?
Well, I chose to work here because I personally have been a patient here, and so I knew what it was like to come here and be on that side. So when it came time to think about actually working here and this opportunity came up, it was something that was easy for me to choose to do because I have a high respect for the work that's done here and do believe that every dollar that comes back to support the work being done here is valuable and needed. And so it was something that I was personally passionate to do.
Okay. And how did Cancer Care Manitoba help you when you had cancer?
Oh, that's a loaded question. Well, they did everything, really. That's a scary time in your life, and I was fairly young. I wasn't a little kid, but I was in my early 20s, and I was going to university, so I really didn't think I'd get sick. And so when I went to my doctor, I had a little lump, and I thought I was getting a cold, and maybe I needed to go on an antibiotic. And so the next thing I know, I was sitting down in one of those clinics meeting a doctor trying to figure out what was in this lump. And so it turned out it was cancer. And so Cancer Care, really, from the moment that me and my family came here, they took care of me. They answered every single question, and it was scary. You don't know what's going on, and you don't think you could be sick because you're young and you feel good. And so they calmed all my fears, and they answered all my questions. And so everything from the care I received from my doctor, but not only him, the nurses, the pharmacists, the receptionists, everyone really, really cares for you and makes you feel comfortable. And even though it is really scary, they can answer questions as best as they can. And I am one of the lucky ones to say that I survived cancer. So I'm eternally grateful to the work that not just doctors here, but any doctor that studies cancer and wants to find a cure. I'm lucky the kind of cancer I had a good treatment. And so I had a great outcome. Not everybody gets a great outcome because there's hundreds and hundreds of types of cancer and different stages. And so it's a big disease that needs a lot of attention. And I just feel really grateful that the type I had already had treatment.
Okay, and I have one more question. How has your foundation grown over time?
Oh, in capacity, over time, I think what's exciting is every year that the foundation has been here, we raise more and more money. And it's not just us, really. We don't do anything if it isn't for people like you and other donors who want to help. So I think what's exciting is when you see more and more people getting behind the work that's happening here, and wanting their money to stay in Manitoba and make sure that it comes to cancer care so that people we know and love are getting good treatment here. One of the things I think cancer care can be really proud of is that generally centers like cancer care, where we saw the research labs and those kind of things, when there's clinical trials and research happening at your cancer facility, they tend to have better outcomes because they're researching current drugs or treatments, and therefore patients can be on some of these groundbreaking, treatments. They do have better outcomes. And so I think that's something as a foundation we're really proud of, because that money that folks raise for us goes towards stuff like that. So I think that's exciting.